Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a titan of the American civil rights movement. His voice echoed with a dream of equality and justice, a dream that reshaped a nation and inspired the world. He stood for peace in a time of great turmoil and division. His leadership gave hope to millions who had been silenced for generations. When he was assassinated on April 4, 1968, it felt as though that dream was shattered. The loss was immense, a deep wound in the soul of America. His powerful words and brave actions had made him a symbol of nonviolent resistance, and his sudden death left a void that is still felt to this day. The story of Dr. King's assassination is known to most. A single bullet fired in Memphis, Tennessee, silenced one of history's most important figures. Yet the final hour of his life, specifically the moments after he was rushed to the hospital, has become a subject of intense debate. For decades, questions have lingered just beneath the surface of the official narrative. Was everything possible done to save him? Were there other forces at play in the hospital room, working to ensure he would not survive? These are not just idle questions. They strike at the very heart of how we remember one of America's greatest leaders, and the circumstances surrounding his tragic end, raising profound doubts that persist to this day. The official account of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s death is a tragic and straightforward timeline of events. On the evening of April 4, 1968, Dr. King was standing on the second-floor balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was in the city to support a sanitation workers' strike, continuing his fight for economic justice. At 6:01 p.m., a single shot rang out. The bullet, fired from a high-powered rifle, struck Dr. King in the face and neck, causing a devastating and catastrophic wound. The force of the impact was so severe that it shattered his jaw, damaged major arteries, and severed his spinal cord. Immediately after the shot, chaos erupted on the balcony. Dr. King's associates, including Ralph Abernathy and Andrew Young, rushed to his side. An ambulance was called, and it arrived within minutes to transport him to the nearby St. Joseph's Hospital. According to official reports, the medical team was faced with an impossible situation. Dr. King had suffered what medical experts would later describe as an unsurvivable injury. The bullet had traveled downward through his body, inflicting massive internal damage. He had lost a tremendous amount of blood, and was showing almost no signs of life upon arrival at the emergency room. At St. Joseph's Hospital, a team of doctors worked frantically to save him. They performed an emergency tracheotomy to try and establish an airway, administered cardiac massage, and gave him blood transfusions in a desperate effort to keep him alive. However, the damage was simply too extensive. The main artery to his spine was severed, and the blood loss was too great to control. Despite their best efforts, the medical team could not restore a stable heartbeat or blood pressure. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was officially pronounced dead at 7:05 p.m. A dramatically different and disturbing version of events has been presented by Dr. William F. Pepper, an attorney and longtime investigator who represented the King family and spent decades investigating the assassination in his book, An Act of State, The Execution of Martin Luther King. Pepper argues the official story hides a government conspiracy. According to his investigation, Dr. King did not die from the single bullet attributed to James Earl Ray. Pepper claims Ray was not the shooter. He alleges Dr. King was still alive when he arrived at St. Joseph's Hospital and that individuals inside the hospital deliberately caused his death. Pepper's narrative: the gunshot wound was serious, but not immediately fatal. He gathered testimony. Witnesses said King was alive and trying to speak as he was placed in the ambulance. One key witness, ambulance driver Houston Carter, allegedly said a police officer placed a pillow over Dr. King's face in the ambulance, attempting to suffocate him. Pepper contends King arrived at the ER still clinging to life. At that point, he argues, a second phase of the plot ensured King would not survive the night. The core claim centers on suspicious events inside the hospital. He alleges Chief of Surgery Dr. Breen Bland ordered ER doctors to stop efforts to save King. Surgical nurse Betty Spates testified Dr. Bland entered and said, "Stop working on that nigger and let him die." Another witness, Dr. Frederick Stone, testified he was told by senior staff to leave the trauma room, an unusual command. Pepper argues these actions were coordinated to prevent life-saving treatment. Pepper presents evidence suggesting King was ultimately killed by suffocation inside the hospital. He cites medical opinions and witness accounts that the official autopsy was incomplete and overlooked signs of asphyxiation. The theory names government elements, the FBI, the CIA, and Memphis police. In 1999, more than 30 years after Dr. King's death, The lingering questions and disturbing claims finally had their day in court. The King family, led by Coretta Scott King Dexter King, filed a wrongful death lawsuit in Memphis. Case title: King Family versus Lloyd Jowers and other unknown co-conspirators. Lloyd Jowers was a former Memphis restaurant owner. In 1993, he publicly claimed he was part of a conspiracy to kill Dr. King. He said he received $100,000 to arrange the assassination, that it was carried out by a Memphis police officer, not James Earl Ray. The King family did not sue for money. Their stated goal was to get the truth on the public record. The trial lasted 4 weeks and was largely ignored by the mainstream media. William Pepper represented the King family, and he presented a vast amount of evidence he had gathered over the years. More than 70 witnesses testified, former government agents, associates of Dr. King, individuals who claimed to have knowledge of the plot. Testimony described a complex web involving the Mafia, the Memphis Police Department, U.S. government agencies, to reach a unanimous and pretty stunning verdict. The jury found Lloyd Jowers and other unknown government agencies were part of a conspiracy to assassinate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The King family's journey from accepting the official narrative to championing the conspiracy theory is a crucial part of this story. In the immediate aftermath, the family, like the rest of the world, believed James Earl Ray had acted alone. They were consumed by grief and the monumental task of carrying on Dr. King's legacy. However, as the years passed, doubts began to surface. They were particularly moved when they met with James Earl Ray in 1997. After that meeting, Dexter Scott King became convinced Ray was not his father's killer, and publicly announced that his family believed in Ray's innocence. This marked a significant turning point. The family's support for a new investigation was not sudden, but a gradual process fueled by their own research and the tireless work of William Pepper. They felt the government's investigation had been flawed from the start, leaving too many questions unanswered. Why was Dr. King's usual police protection removed on the day he was killed? Why were trees near the Lorraine Motel mysteriously cut down, giving a clear line of sight to the balcony? Why did the government seem so determined to stick to the lone gunman theory, even when new evidence emerged? These were the questions that drove the family to seek a different kind of justice. The 1999 civil trial was the culmination of their search for truth. Today, the narrative of Dr. King's assassination remains sharply divided. On one side stands mainstream history, which is taught in schools, presented in most documentaries, and upheld by government institutions. This version holds that James Earl Ray, a racist drifter, was the lone assassin. On the other side of this divide are the supporters of the conspiracy theory, led by William Pepper and the King family. They argue that the mainstream narrative is a deliberate cover-up. They believe the evidence they presented in the 1999 trial is credible, and that the jury's verdict should be respected as the most thorough legal examination of the assassination to date. This group believes that dismissing the conspiracy narrative is naive and ignores the political climate of the 1960s. They remind us that the FBI, under J. Edgar Hoover, had a well-documented history of harassing and attempting to discredit Dr. King. In this context, they argue, the idea of a government-backed assassination is not far-fetched at all. The questions surrounding Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s final hour persist. The official story feels too simple for a man whose life was so complex. Dr. King was not just a beloved leader, he was a radical who challenged the foundations of American power, reflect a larger struggle over how history is written and who gets to write it. As long as the King family and their supporters continue to demand answers, and as long as the shadow of a government conspiracy lingers, the final hour of Dr. King's life will remain one of the most debated and unsettling chapters in American history. This information provided by The Famous Brown Show. To be a financial supporter to help produce more history stories, send all donations to Cash App $famous1954. Our contact email is mrptbrown@aol.com.